Hello,
Hello,
everybody.
Hello to the cats on
headbutting me.
Welcome.
Danger's headbutting me repeatedly.
He
So
wants
he
your
says hello as
attention.
well. Those of you out there watching in Facebook and YouTube land or listening in podcast land, all of the above, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, all of that good stuff. And don't forget to do that now. Just go ahead. Just click it right now before you get distracted. And then also join in the conversation. We want to hear from you. So Anthony always has adorable cats behind him, and mine is on my lap. So
I do.
and that is all.
And our viewers like the cats. We've gotten some comments on it.
We do. Well, what's not to like? What's not to like? Right, Danger? Right?
Well, we have dogs too.
Yes, we have to all of the above. You know, it's funny. So, well, okay, off subject. There's like a meme out there, and it's talks about how only dog people are like the arbiters of like, I'm a dog person, I'm a cat person. And it only comes from like the dog side of the community. Like cat people are like, no, we just like animals. Like, it's not like there's a hard divide. Just like an animal. Like,
You might be getting that mixed up with people who identify as dogs.
Oh,
The furries of the community.
Wait,
Make sure it's not a catastrophe. Look at what Kevin wrote.
Let's just talk about our pets this episode.
Yeah, we're
it'll be fun.
So let's have a moment. We're going to be talking about coaching toxic leaders. I really think this can apply to coaching toxic people, but we are in our realm of leadership coaching. So I think a big disclaimer before we delve into this possibly labely conversation. Just remember that a couple things that, you know, people can have these traits that we discuss, and it doesn't mean that that's the only thing they are. We all have little traits that can be toxic and things that come up that you know, at times that maybe happen even without our awareness. Like Jen is a mansplainer and Anthony's a Debbie Downer. So we can have these toxic traits and not even realize it, and they don't define us, and it doesn't mean that we aren't capable of changing, growing, and identifying. We're not saying that it's a hard and fast, you can never change your ways. And also, we're not diagnosing anything. So just so you know. And that's it for my...
and that silly little test that we took did not have a balance test. It was just to see if you were toxic, what toxicity you would be.
We took a silly test quiz, as we enjoy doing in our day-to-day.
Jen and Lisa and Brooke keep spinning in circles about this test. They just hate that it shows them the truth.
I don't even understand how I can mansplain. What does that even mean?
Well, why don't you explain to us? Go ahead, Jen, we're listening.
Jen is not amused.
We can tell. And that's particularly.
Well, because now I'm like, wait, maybe I do kind of over-explain sometimes.
I mean, I think we all have those moments. Again, this is not like let's all give ourselves a little bit of grace.
Not that to me is not scientific, especially with the questions they asked.
Oh gosh, no. And that's one of these things too to keep in mind is that we can be anything we want at any moment, right?
Yeah,
so.
keep puffing your copium.
Okay, Debbie Downer.
Oh no, we have a new name for Anthony. He's no longer the warden.
No, I am still the warden. That has not
Well, we could call him Warden Debbie.
Debbie Warden. Yeah.
That's being sexist. I'm sure other people who are not masculine names can be Debbie Downers as well. I'm not a Deborah Downer. I'm a Debson. That's the male version of that name.
So let's now go into coaching our toxic leader. So I'm going to just sort of bring up some traits. There's this really fantastic article by Harvard Business Review, and it's written from the perspective of an executive coach and the different things that were brought to their attention. And I'll even drop a link to it in here. Oh, okay, good. For if other people want to read it, because I thought it was very fascinating. And one of the things she brings up is one of just common things. I don't know if it's a he or she, honestly. I just, of course, I'm assuming it's a she because I'm a woman, which is not right. So, or I don't know. So they wrote narcissism is something that is kind of rampant. And I know we've mentioned about bad leadership and things like that before, but this is not. What's interesting is the way she approaches it. It's how do I coach a narcissist, a leader that's displaying narcissistic traits to be successful, right? To curb those habits and things like that, and be able to function better in the company, and do their job, right? This person was going to be appointed to a big position, and they there was some telltale signs that they might be a narcissist. So what might you suppose is a good way to question a client? She didn't know this going in, or they didn't know this going in. How do you suppose, I guess it is a he, how do you suppose he may have questioned or found a way to identify that there were some narcissistic traits going on if you just had to guess?
I mean, I'd probably start by asking, how do your teammates or the people around you react to you, or how do they seem to view you?
That was definitely she spoke with the employees, spoke with the people, or the team, went in, spoke to everybody. And in speaking with the other people, there were some telltale signs. One being that the person in charge thought they were the bee's knees.
Right. Yeah.
And especially viewing the coach as being in a leadership role, sort of, really wanted to demonstrate forth how fantastic they were. But there was a hardcore divide when you talk to everybody else, and everybody else was like, no, they're the problem. Right? And so there's that. It immediately led the coach to believe, oh, I'm dealing with someone who's got some narcissistic tendencies here.
Can I ask a question?
No.
Is it possible? Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
Ask.
Is it possible to be a narcissist and not toxic?
I think that,
Yeah.
we all have to have
So then,
narcissism in us.
what is being toxic then?
They tend to devaluate their team so that they can look fantastic, right?
Well, just like a toxic person in general.
Inconsistent is the first thing that comes to my mind. Someone that what they say is not consistent with their behavior.
Well, okay. So, how do we identify? Are you asking specifically about the narcissistic toxicity?
Just toxic in general, like because that's what I'm asking essentially.
Well, now
I'm looking at a definition. It says a toxic person is anyone whose behavior adds negatively and upset to your life. Many times people who are toxic are dealing with their own stresses and traumas. So basically someone who ignores whatever you need and only focuses from their perspective.
I think it's also somebody who it affects others. I think toxic
Manipulative behavior. Yeah.
It's
so of course you can have then all your own like personal demons and like negative attitudes, but if it only affects you, you're not really a toxic person. Once it starts affecting other people negatively, then you're toxic.
That's what I was going to ask questions around, lead you to essentially was, yes, it's when it starts to permeate out of you and then affect others around you and not positively, right? So when we think of something that's toxic, if there's a nuclear spill, what happens? It permeates the ground. It permeates everything that comes within a certain space area of that toxic spill. So you think about it, you touch it and you're affected by it. And to not be affected by it would be almost, virtually impossible barring the right circumstances. So that's really, I think, when we say toxic, it's not that it's just your problem, it's that it's affecting the world around you.
So in the Harvard Business Review article you mentioned, this narcissistic individual was narcissistic and toxic because it affected
It's
the other
affecting the
people.
team, and there was something going on, and that had to essentially it was affecting his possibility for success. So that he was up for a job, but because the team was not, there was a resonance, they could tell something was wrong, and there was a worry that they were not going to be able to fill the shoes of the leader when they got bumped up to the next position. So the coach went in and worked with that individual in order to ensure that when they did get given this higher up role, it wasn't going to be a detriment to the company. So, and so it's important to the company for the company to know that this individual was capable of filling this role. And so the company brought the coach in order to work with them and ensure that they were going to be capable of being a success in this big position within the company, which is very, I think, proactive of that company. Good on them, right?
Because toxicity in a workplace is going to have a lot of turnover, and turnover is really expensive.
Yeah.
Yes. You don't want to be in that space.
So what's interesting, the coach was able to identify that this person displayed narcissistic traits, but the coach didn't go, okay, well, you're hopeless, you're all of these things. The coach had enough knowledge to know how to work with somebody that was a bit narcissistic and get them to be successful and not default to those narcissistic tendencies and start to look at things differently. How would you guess the coach did that, out of curiosity?
My first thought is that the coach brings to the person's perspective that everything that they're doing is for them. It's for their benefit. And so the more that the client is willing to be honest, the more they're going to benefit from it. That's my first thought.
Competition, I would also probably say, helping them recognize that there's a little competition to better themselves and to bring the team along. I was watching, I don't know what show, I just thought of this. It was about a young child who was severely in a narcissistic behaviors, and that's what they did. They made it a game for her. It was a young lady. They made it a game for her to achieve kindness, and when the kindness, then she got to, when she utilized the kindness, she got to go to the next level. So they utilized levels, competition, in a way that self-motivated her.
What I think a lot of people don't realize is at the core of like narcissistic traits is typically deep insecurity. So it becomes very much about building up that confidence and building up, and you can absolutely use competitiveness to do that. They began with making you realize that using the ambition, like they want to be the best, they want this role, and using that to motivate them essentially, and pointing out the moments when those narcissistic traits were coming up and how they were derailing them from their success. And then coaching them, questioning them around different approaches to similar situations and how they could change their approach, really, and in working in those situations. And as that happened, they were gaining more confidence and and realizing, hey, if I don't act like if I don't demean others, if I don't devalue what others are doing, and instead I build them up, they started to see how that helped them to be more successful. And in doing that, it becomes like a snowball, which is pretty cool, actually. It takes time, though. So it becomes about allowing them to share the limelight and how that's okay, and building the confidence for them to do that. And I just found that so fascinating because I could see something is happening in a executive coaching space quite often, right?
So it's essentially giving them the comfortability to try new things that they otherwise probably, maybe, like you were speaking about, being insecure is one of the bases for being a narcissist. Being more comfortable in those spaces. That is interesting.
Yeah, because I don't think we often look at a narcissist and we don't apply that level of empathy to them.
It's negative
We look at them
connotation.
and go, you gross, and get rubbed wrong. And I think as a coach, it would take a tremendous amount of, self-restraint and empathy to sit there and go, okay, how do I best communicate with this person for their success? And I think I found, that such a neat way to look at your client. It's not as, okay, this is what they are. It's that, okay, I can identify these traits. I can change my style as a coach to speak a better language for this person. And I thought that was just a really powerful tool. And obviously something that comes probably with time and experience. Any other thoughts about coaching a narcissist and a narcissistic leader?
Well, I was thinking about the couples I've coached. There's been some individuals that were stronger on that side of their personality, and the goal for the relationship was that they wanted to continue the relationship. So it became a little dance to follow their lead on how they wanted to be coached and how just everything that you've said and we've all said, how to help in that moment for them to be successful. You've got to listen beyond listening, meaning you don't just listen to what they're saying, you listen to the things that they're not saying, and you're really watching the body language more so than you are the overt. You're looking for the covert messages as well.
And if you're all open to it, I'm happy to just go down and sort of keep discussing the other traits that come up with a leader, unless you all can think of one off the top of your head, but I'll just keep going down the list.
Yeah.
How about the manic depressive?
Oh, Anthony, thank you.
Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, you don't have the article out? That's the next one. So essentially, yes, and this is the moment when we said at the top of this that we're not diagnosing, right? And it's even mentioned by the coach in this article that within the space, this is often something treated by a psychologist, somebody who's got. So this is
in this example, the client is admitted to being diagnosed as bipolar by their psychiatrist, and they're being treated by it. But they're also a leader who needs coaching, and their mood swings are toxic towards the people around them.
Yeah. So what do you imagine that shows up like in the workplace if you have a manic depressive leader?
Black and white thinking.
Nothing's ever good enough.
Either one way or the other. There's no middle ground.
Well, it's never good enough though.
Well, and if they're in a manic stage, they might be okay, seemingly. Everything's like go, go, go. And then the next thing you know, they've just completely given up on whatever it is you guys are working towards. And you're like confused because it was their project in the first place. And now they don't even give a crap about it. Sorry, I think I have experience with this type of person. Yeah.
Any other ways?
I want to say.
Oh, go on, Jerome.
I was going to say I can see there's some spaces maybe where this might be maybe a toxic leader, but maybe beneficial to the position. I'm thinking like in extreme support, law enforcement and like the military. That would be, I feel like, maybe an instance where that could be potentially a benefit to filling your duties for whatever position that is.
Like in what way are you thinking?
so manic depressive is usually I'm assuming, again, black and white. There's one way to do something, and then kind of like what Jen was speaking about.
Yeah.
You do, there comes a point where they're pushing towards a goal they want you to, especially when it comes to training, they're pushing you towards an end goal of being trained properly. And then maybe not necessarily are, maybe, okay, the more I think about it, maybe it isn't. At the end, I'm thinking they drop.
Maybe just
They
the
eventually
manic
drop.
part.
Yeah, I think, exactly. I think, the more and more I think about it, it's probably not the best. To say.
Well, I
Well,
think it's not a healthy environment for sure.
So when considering the relationships
Yeah.
between the colleagues, like the colleagues might feel like they're walking on eggshells, or like, I don't know how to bring up an issue to my leader because they can either take this well, or it might,
Yes.
just go horrible.
So
I don't know what to do.
That's what makes it toxic, right? Is it good? Like we're there's different levels, but again, that's not to say that these people can't be functioning and fantastic. And I've know this mental disorder very well because I have family who have it, and it is when they're in the manic space, they can be some of the most charismatic, wonderful, fantastic to be around human beings on the planet, right? Like somebody that just, it's like, wow, the energy coming off of this person. And then the other way are equally as low, right? So we've got theirs. And so knowing that and not knowing, just like Anthony said, what you're going to get, or why, oh my goodness, why am I the enemy today? Right? And when yesterday I was not, and not understanding or knowing, and it's not something that the employee is doing, right? It's something that is going on within that person. And if it's not communicated and not managed, it can be a situation where everybody is terrified, I would think, to some degree, or unsure, and feeling unstable. In the case of this one shared here, they were very micromanagey. So they would go in and be all up in people's stuff. But they were fantastic at pulling in clients and fantastic at doing that, and doing that well. And that's because the clients were probably only contacted when they were in a really good space, right? But if you're in the office 9 to 5 every day, you're gonna have it makes it harder. And so they appointed somebody to, essentially, they worked with the coach and decided, I'm gonna appoint somebody to handle the office stuff, and I'm going to stick where I shine over here and do that. And I thought that was a very cool move. And that's what the client came to through lots of questions and everything. They were able to, the coach worked with them and identified their strengths and what they were really good at within the company, and then coach them to a plan to excel, and make sure the company excels. And that was simply by removing them from the minutia of the day-to-day and putting himself in that strong position of working with clients, bringing in new clients, and ensuring that kind of stuff. So.
Well, and how powerful is that for the individual to be in that space where they can work on, they may not be on purpose working on their self-esteem, but through that managing process of putting them where their strength is, to me, that's an open possibility of their self-esteem improving.
There was a really interesting thing that this coach did too, and I want to get your take on it. So in talking with a client, they had found out that the manic depressive was much more controlled when he got married, and that when his wife and him, she mellowed him out, and when the wife and him were like passing ships, and he had even cheated on her, and he didn't know she knew, and because in the States. But so she asked him, would it be okay if we brought your wife in to this? And he ended up coaching the wife and the husband together and helping that relationship. And that helped him everywhere else. And so it was very powerful.
Makes the dream work.
But again, one of those situations where I feel like this executive coach is really thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
and it's really doing some deep exploration.
Well, but it wasn't only the coach thinking outside of the box. It's the flexibility the coach was empowered with that allowed, I think you said it was she, that allowed her. There's a lot of rigidity sometimes, even in a coaching, corporate coaching kinds of mannerisms. They would not necessarily allow that. So basically good on the company, good on the coach, and good on the husband-wife team, because they really looked for success and they found it and were able to work it in such a positive way. What a great story.
I think in this case it was a CEO, or so he it was up to that person. So there wasn't and was willing to go there, which is very powerful. And also how interesting, not something you hear a lot, right, is we're talking with, I don't know, how would you approach that as a coach? Just curious, how would you approach it if you heard? I guess you would just ask, would you like to bring your wife in?
So, you shared with me on how, I'm assuming the client shared this. I know
yes, absolutely, yeah. Through some awesome exploration with that coach. So
yeah. You shared with me how you feel comfortable in whatever words he would have used. You shared with me that scenario of the wife and how you feel around there. How could that possibly happen here in your business? What ways could you take that and move it into what you do here for your work? There's all kinds of ways to do it, depending on what he actually said and reflecting those words back into that, that question.
I'm also gonna take a leap here. This coach that's in the HBR, are they credentialed ICF?
I'm not sure if they are.
Because there is the possibility that this person's not a credentialed coach and was just like, "Hey, how do you feel about bringing your wife in? I'm proposing a solution. I'm proposing, here's some advice, or maybe here's a solution that I'm proposing."
Yeah.
Which,
well,
if it works, it works.
Yeah.
There's a little more flexibility when you're not credentialed. But
so it's in his work in his work as an executive coach, a psychotherapist. Katz de Vries sometimes comes across mental demons. Both a psychotherapist and a coach, but that's, I'm not, that's not to say whether or not they are, it doesn't say if they are credentialed or not. We don't know.
So those of you watching, sort of just keep that in mind, that some of the things we might be discussing are like towing the line of like,
but if you're
talking, solution.
Let's say you're talking to your client says, I feel way better when my wife and I are in a good place. And then you ask, okay, well, what has to happen for your wife and you to get into a good place? And the client could very well be the one that leads you to that solution. Well, I'd really like to get her in here and for us to be able to have an open conversation about what's going on.
But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of executive coaches and business coaches that would not be comfortable with that.
Yes.
They would refer out, and then I would ask to be able to collaborate with the whole team to help possibly build what will work for the CEO in this.
So now let's move on to our next one, shall we?
How many traits do they have listed in this article?
There are 2 more, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 more. So this one and then 1 more after this. Hi, Sue. Good to see you. The next one is our passive-aggressive leader.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting take on the passive-aggressive. And notice it's when you read about the coaching experience, it's like, man, it could be really hard to coach this person. Like, because the coach talks about how with a passive-aggressive person, they enjoy getting a rise out of somebody, especially a negative one. And so they will be deliberately passive-aggressively resistant and respond in ways to like needle even under you as a coach's skin. And they are looking for your reaction, for you to react. And so you have to, as a coach, have to be really capable of like not responding in that way and giving that to them. And it's just a very interesting read on how to coach a passive aggressive leader. What are your thoughts?
I was thinking of Anthony's experience the other day. While more aggressive than passive,
Yeah, there's nothing passive
I
about
think
I wasn't being passive aggressive, mind you, for the
Yeah.
viewers. This is
No.
no. I think you stayed calm. You didn't buy into it. I could hear a little.
my rage rising.
I didn't hear rage. I think frustration is what I would, because it's just afterwards that was different. But in the moment of the discussion, that you weren't going to be led there, that you were trying to utilize skills that allowed you to share what the correct information was, even though that person didn't want to hear what the correct information was. The frustration of just wanting a yes or no, and giving that person the yes or no, but trying to follow it up with what the facts were, that was not wanting to be heard. And you followed through with an even keel. So I think you took this call, and while it wasn't amazing, you were.
For everyone who doesn't know, there was a difficult call that came in the other day that me and Jen handled. I guess the passive aggressive part that sort of fits into that is sort of the evasiveness of an issue. Like when you are confronted by someone, the passive aggressive person avoids the main source of the confrontation and find other avenues to address their ill feelings. They don't like the direct confrontation. So when I, on the phone, tried to directly head off, what is the source of this conflict? This individual that we are referencing is trying to work around it and not, address the main source of the problem. And that's a typical passive aggressive behavior. In office situations or in workplace situations, it's a little more subtle. It might show up as like being, inefficient or procrastinating or evasive or, things like that. Can be seen as passive aggressive. Oh, here's a passive aggressive move I love doing.
Snarky behavior. If you have a snarky response to something, that's being passive aggressive.
Yeah, this is my favorite response that is passive aggressive, and you learn to do this in a business environment. It's the per my last email. Per my last email, or per our policy that you agreed to, or per the student packet.
Is that passive aggressive though?
It's passive aggressive.
A little bit.
It's passive. It's
definitely accurate though.
It is accurate. But I think it can go without being said sometimes.
So,
but I love pulling that one again for people.
One of the things to keep in mind as a coach and coaching someone who's passive aggressive is somebody who is passive aggressive tends to not be open and honest with somebody they feel is an authority figure. So if me as a coach am putting myself in a role as an authority figure and not bringing myself to their level as an equal, that client is going to be less willing to be open and honest with me, because typically somebody who's passive aggressive has been raised or put in an environment where they feel like they cannot express their emotions for one reason or another, right? So because there's going to be consequences, there's something bad that's going to happen if they share what's really going on. And so it comes out, rather than sharing their emotions, it comes out in different ways. And one of the ways this client did it is they're a boss, and one of their subordinates would have a request for them that they need done from their boss, and the boss would procrastinate on the ones that she was the most annoyed with. So she would wait and not get that done as timely because she was annoyed with that person. And that was one of the ways that she would get her passive aggressive revenge, right? And so how do you think a coach handles something like that, or boss like that that's doing this kind of thing.
How does that behavior benefit you? It's in the short term and in the long term, because it does. In the short term, it feels good to be passive aggressive or get retribution, but then you pair that with, okay, is that beneficial for the company? Is that beneficial for the other person? And is that beneficial for you in the long term?
So I think you're like part of the way there, but there's one piece you're missing.
Why don't you stop being so passive aggressive, Brooke, and just tell me the answer then?
So the first step is to get that person speaking and just sharing about what her goals are, what she wants, what the intentions are for her work and what she is doing, and then asking around her behaviors, and then pointing out when they aren't aligning, but not making a judgment, just pointing out when they aren't aligning and letting that person sit in silence and reflect on how what they're doing is not what they really want, and then that's the first piece, right? Getting them to start to identify those moments, and then it's about building up the self-esteem for them to share, and sort of being able to coach them into small bite-sized situations where they're able to share their feelings, and then being there to coach them when that happens. So how did that go for you? Let's talk through, okay, what did you learn from that? What's our next step? Very interesting. I can see how this could be a maddening situation as a coach.
Yes. I think it's critical to be calm in this situation, because you definitely don't want to coach passive aggressiveness with passive aggressiveness. So, I mean, you don't want to come off as passive aggressive into someone.
Or aggressive at all, right? It's like a kid glove situation, because you want them to be able to be okay, have their emotions and feel them and not feel judged or like they're going to be anything. But at the same time, we're also got to point out that there's some things not adding up here. And at the same time, you've got a client that likes to needle at you to get reactions out of you.
but that's, when we have the opportunity to mirror, we can really ask into that. I noticed when we were talking about this occurred. Share with me what's going on there.
I could see, okay, share with me what's going on there. Nothing.
So when you said that, tell me what's underneath that.
Underneath what?
And then I would reflect back. When you said this, there was a tone. I don't know that I could do the tone. I don't know that I would do the tone. But I would say, here's what I experienced. I'm not sure.
Sort of a bitchy tone to your voice.
I love but that you could see, but then I could stay in my passive aggressive space where I feel like maybe you're being a little judgy and just be not giving it back to you and not giving you the answer, because I like to see you squirm.
And what is the benefit of watching me be in discomfort?
Well, I would, but I'm saying I don't think as a passive aggressive I would say that, right? And this is a directly quote from this article. Sort of points out passive aggressives have low self-esteem, and the coach has to help them build it up. This is best done by getting them to practice directness and asking them to explain how they would resolve and improve situations. Wait, hold on. For that, I want to see exploring the. Where did it go? There, I was reading the wrong inconsistency. Of course she would resort to denial or evasion whenever. So I would point out the inconsistencies, of course, and she would resort to denial or evasion, often citing forgetfulness as an excuse when she hadn't done what she was supposed to do. But it became increasingly difficult for her to get away with that. I was always careful, however, to accept her defensive reactions for the time being. When dealing with people like Mary, you should never argue correct denials. Just quietly back away, leaving them to reflect on their comments. Passive aggressives see arguments as an invitation to cast themselves as victims, making you the bad guy, and they are very experienced at it. By sharing my awareness and covert anger, her covert anger, I gave Mary the message that her style was not the way to deal effectively with interpersonal relationships, which so interesting.
You could just sit there and not have attitude, right? And sit there in silence and let them scramble to find the words too. which that has happened. You just sit there and go, oh, and then they talk more and usually talk themselves out of it. That works too.
If the client was being passive aggressive and doing what you were just doing, Brooke, where it's like, no, nothing, I would probably say, what is it that you really want to say right now? What is it that really needs to be heard right now?
Sure.
Because they're obviously hiding from something.
No,
give them that
nothing.
space.
I'm good.
Okay, then.
What are you doing here?
It feels like, I think, to successfully coach somebody who's passive aggressive, it might take a few sessions.
Right.
It's more than likely not going to happen right then and there in that first couple sessions.
Coaching passive aggressives is exhausting. They're irritating because they subtly show you that they feel a sense of accomplishment when they've managed to frustrate you. It took a lot for me not to let Mary to get to me, but as time passed, she took her first baby steps in trying to interact with people in a new, different way. She would practice expressing her irritation more directly, and then report her successes and failures back to me. And because they generally liked the results, she gained assurance and continued to go down the right path. Again, they're saying that these ones and the narcissists have a tendency to fall back into bad old behaviors. So it's good to have scheduled check-ins with them, even when they've graduated from the coaching, and say, hey, you want to check back in a month or 2 months from now and see how we're doing. But I could see how that could get very frustrating. She even said there were moments where they would have a plan and she would come in and Mary would deliberately not follow the plan and would even break little rules in the coaching container to try to get reactions out of the coach because she likes to needle at authority. And as a coach, I would say, okay, Mary, that's not acceptable. And would have to reset the coaching container with her and do so in a way that was very concise and short. And then after that correction would then talk through strengths and what was good and positive things with her. So that
I can tell you a time that I was passive aggressive that with one of my teachers. I was in a logic class and I was struggling, trying to understand all the different forms of argument and how to apply them and how to recognize them. Slippery slope, I got no problem. And so it was a very big flirt when I was younger. So I wouldn't be passive aggressive. I would mercilessly flirt with him, and he would start stuttering his words and just being flabbergasted.
Lisa, this is toxic.
Score.
Okay, now we got a new toxic behavior.
Merciless flirting.
I was in my 20s. Cut me some slack.
Merciless flirt.
It's coming from a student to a teacher, not any other way, not in an office, not in the teacher to the student. But you would put him off. Oh.
I was very insecure about not being able to do, but I could fluster him.
Wow.
So
who needs logic when you got looks? I guess I don't know.
Right? Really, I think anybody, no matter how you look, can put somebody off by mercilessly flirting. So
that's actually that phone call that I did. That's what I did.
You were merciless.
I just
so our last
flirted with the person.
Our last topic, and I think this one is less. I can see how it could be toxic, but I think I don't know. I feel for this person more than the others, I guess, and that's somebody who's emotionally disconnected, and it's somebody. There's an actual disorder. It's called alexithymia, and it's somebody who they have trouble identifying emotions within themselves, putting words to emotions, and they tend to not at all identify as being emotional. They tend to be very dry. Let's follow by the steps X, Y, Z, and then they don't know how to react when other people are having emotion around them. So they don't tend to be,
what's this person feeling right now?
They don't tend to be these big charismatic leaders, but you find them in very tech companies. You find them in virtual environments and things like that, where they really excel at doing their job and doing, following numbers and following structure. And in businesses where you have to have a lot of very precise structure. So coding, things like that. But they still get put into leadership roles and still have moments where they struggle.
So this is like a real life kind of story as well that sort of deals with that. It seems that a lot of that tech industry leadership kind of role attracts a lot of neurodivergent people who might be on the autism spectrum or maybe Asperger's. And I recall a time where I was applying to a tech company that was like that, like a systems sort of like, what is it, like an IT position a little while ago. My friends, basically, he straight up asked me, he's like, my boss is looking for someone who's like, works well with people and is like, they can be autistic, but they can't be like bad with people and emotions because all of our people are like that in this team, in this organization, and we need people who
Need
are
someone.
better. We need people who are better with working with like other people in this way because like our client relationships are suffering. I obviously didn't get the job because I'm here right now, so I didn't fit that bill. But those were the actual words that were used by me by my friend of mine, transcribed by the employer. So it seems a lot of people who are maybe on the spectrum, who are attracted to these kinds of fields, might suffer from that, and it expresses itself as maybe toxic behavior in a leadership role.
And so the coach discovered this by asking him about stressful situations and then asking about what they felt in those stressful situations. And they would describe what was happening and also maybe having a stomach ache, maybe having physical symptoms, but never citing emotional symptoms. And so for that was a big flag that this person was very disconnected from their emotions and their ability to identify their emotions and know what was going on emotionally. A very cool moment when the coach is being very curious about and asking in these spaces and learning a great deal about their client by asking very powerful questions about situations and having this sort of knowledge. What do you think? How would you work with that person to be more successful?
I have a thought.
Okay.
So my first thought is when coaches do, where do you feel that in your body? Like, is that appropriate for this client? I don't know.
So usually you associate that with an emotion, but we're going to say it in such a way without the emotion. When that happened, was there any feeling your body felt? And where would that have been? Right? They're not going to assign a feeling to it, but they would assign, like Brooke was saying, I felt it in my stomach. When this occurred, they're able to report it as a reporting, but not really what they're experiencing.
This also might be an issue of like speaking the client's language, because to me, this probably explains why I didn't get that job. I'm more on the side of emotional disconnectedness. So when you ask that question, where do you feel that in your body, or like where does that feeling located in your body? That's like a metaphorical question. I don't, because a lot of people will probably interpret that as a literal question. I feel that here in my heart or in my stomach. That doesn't really jive with me. I don't really understand how to answer that question. Other than saying I don't.
You all, I think, are also reacting from an emotional place and putting the chicken far before the egg here. So the first step was to figure out how to build trust with Robert. And that was to help Robert in little interpersonal situations in his day-to-day life. And because he had to see the value in the coaching for him to understand that this process was going to help him. Yeah. So it was about finding little ways that they could help, the coach could help in his day-to-day interpersonal relationships, and then him seeing the value in those little successes, baby successes. And then once he started to see the baby successes, he as a human being started to open up and be more comfortable. And even his sense of humor started to show. And he started, so like these little things where he started to open up. And what was so cool about this story, it even got to the point where he was able to cry in front of him, the coach, and was able to start to feel and I like be able to identify emotions in situations. And an example that they give that was cool is I guess one of the, I'll read it here. Data work very focused. When I asked if there's anything that recently happened in work, it puzzled him. He mentioned a strange behavior with a new assistant that suddenly burst into tears in his office. And when I pressed him on it, he said that he had felt or asked him what he had felt when that happened. He said, not much. It only gave him a headache. When I asked what he had done to stop the assistant or help the assistant from crying, he said nothing. But he asked her to return to her office. So
get back to work.
Whether it might be, I asked whether it might be more helpful to inquire what the problem was, and if there's anything he could do to help her. And he responded that he hadn't even thought about that, but if something like that reoccurred, he would try to do advice. Took the advice, and once he started to build up the confidence in the coaching process, it's just really cool to think about this human being start to open up and then really discover their own emotions and be able to deal with their own emotions. So.
And I want to throw in here, just off topic for a second, it's how you work with distrusting teenagers as well. Kind of the same thing. You don't go dive in, because a distrusting teenager is not going to be interested in that. Little baby steps.
And also that gave a whole bunch of extra like tools that you could use with somebody who is suffering from this. But I mean, I don't know necessarily if it falls in coaching space, but reflective observation, biofeedback, relaxation training, autogenic training, guided imagery, and hypnosis might also help somebody in this space, but is what they mentioned. But
now we're just getting in, healing crystals might help.
Essential oils.
Bringing a body awareness to the sensate, like they process the world differently than we do, and so it's sort of about building a connection, which is very interesting.
Yeah,
and allowing them to leave that hyper rational space and explore a different space.
Mm-hmm.
So.
well, and it empowered that person that you were talking about in that article. It totally empowered that person to learn and grow from. So what a cool story.
Can we go back to what Anthony said real quick about how that question, where do you feel it in your body, is not speaking his language? Because I think that's really interesting to point out, is that question is a different language for some clients based on the way their brain works, based on the way they process things, based on the way they think, right? I mean, that question doesn't always create results.
Yeah. Well, and it can, and that's not to say, I mean, also think about it. We're talking a kinesthetic language when we ask that too. So it might not be the way they process the world. And so identifying how that person
even that phrase that you just said, how do you process the world? That's a completely the opposite, I guess, side of the coin. Is like, instead of feeling based, I'm process based.
And what does that say about me? I'm audio digital.
How does one thing link to the other in a clear, logical chain, rather than feelings?
And I'm an audio digital kinesthetic processor, so I can feel. Like I say, I'm a feeling robot, but I feel very safe in processes. But I also am one of those people that when I am upset, my stomach hurts, my hands sweat. I feel anxiety, and I can't understand what I'm feeling until I'm out of that feeling. Typically, until I've left the situation, all of the physical processes have calmed down, and I can identify then what is going on with it. But it's not something that I'm able to do in the moment very well. So I've gotten better at it, though.
You know what's funny? That question, where do you feel it in your body? It's always in the exact same spot for me, no matter what the feeling is. It's always right here. It just all goes right there.
I don't feel it. No, it's I'll feel my stomach, my gut a lot of the times, my heart, my hands. Never the head, because my head doesn't. It's just my head just. So, all right, that's it. We're done. We gotta sign off, y'all.
Wow. We're done talking about leaders.
Yes.
And next week we are not.
We are not here next week. We are celebrating a holiday with friends and family.
As you will as well.
So we will not, it's a holiday. It's the 4th. Happy 4th of July to everybody. Enjoy your fireworks if that's something you do. And we will be back the following week for a month-long discussion of self-sabotage. I'm a little sad self-sabotage is going to be short, but July is a longer month, so maybe we'll get at least 4 weeks in. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Kevin. Did I miss anybody? Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And
Thank you, Anthony.
Who's going to do our social sign off?
I'll do it. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, follow, and share this with someone you think would benefit from it. And make sure you take our classes because they're amazing and they're only 3 days. And they're ICF accredited, and you'll become part of the CLCI family, and you'll be an alumni, and you'll be invited to our alumni events, and it'll be amazing. So we can't wait to see you there.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right. See you guys.